Hey, welcome. We're live. Anuraag,
Great.
thank you very much for being here with us. We are very, very excited. A bunch of people are already logged in, and the entire conversation is going to be centered today around data. Very excited. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Anuraag. Anuraag is a special guest with us today. He has dedicated his career to unlocking the hidden potential within data through cutting edge technology. Anuraag Mucherla is his name, and he is a senior data architect, and he's here to share his expertise and his insights with us. And why is this important? This is important because we live in a world where data is the lifeblood of every organization, and Anurag plays that pivotal role in reshaping how companies harness their data for better decision making. In short, he helps companies uncover hidden insights within data through technology. And with the way the business landscape is changing, companies find themselves in that sea of data. And these data, they are kind of scattered around various systems, spreadsheets, disparate systems in different locations. And this data fragmentation kind of lead to countless hours spent compiling information and making decisions that are based on incomplete or inconsistent data. And this, for most organizations, can be one, time consuming and very risky. Anurag is here to change that narrative. With his expertise and experience, he builds innovative solutions that centralizes data collection, transforming that raw data into actionable insight. And through the power of analytics and data visualization, he empowers organizations to make informed decisions with confidence. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome welcome Anuraag Mucherla to our session today, and get ready to discover the keys to unlocking the full potential of your data resources. Thank you very much, Anuraag.
Thank you, Russell, and nice to meet you again. It's a great honor to be part of the Glappy Village here, to be able to make a difference in the community and get introduction to technology. So I'm excited to be here, and thank you for the opportunity.
Amazing. Thank you very much. So, Anurag, before we delve into data, the world of data and whatnot, I wanted to kind of reconnect with our story. I met you 4 years, 5 years ago, 2018, 2019, right?
Yep.
Thereabout. And, I was an agile coach basically within the organization that you were serving at that point in time. One of the things I found very fascinating with working with you was you had a magical way of really making something as complex as data interesting. I was very fascinated. Let's go back to that time. What really led you into data, the world of data? Tell us about your journey.
So I think I've always been interested in like the IT space with computers, and I used to play a lot of games in my childhood. Um, I think it was really during my undergrad when I was in college where I got to be an opportunity to be part of an internship program that was focused dedicated towards like data and analytics, to which I had no clue up until then, like what does that even mean? And then being part of that internship program showcased a lot of value to me, like what data is, how data helps companies like establish value out of it, how can even smallest amount of data can lead to like huge insights that can help drive a business from making more revenue, increasing their profits, making better decision making across the board. That's what really just first one that got introduced me to data. And then from there I think I had an uphill in my mind to further educate myself with what goes on in the industries and start learning about data. And which is how I am here today, helping companies, streamline their data processes and so forth.
Wow, amazing! I find that very exciting. I now, if you look at that experience, your journey, a lot of people, by the way, a lot of people who are on this call are going to be leaders who use data within the organization. Others are individuals who are in different industries, in different fields, but are looking to transition into data. So I'm guessing that we will be doing a lot of breaking down of some of these concepts and some teaching, as it were. So people who are not familiar with this domain would, learn a thing or two in this conversation. I'm hoping we're going to be able to do that. Yes.
Yes, I'm hoping I'm gonna make a difference, at least give some value to everyone out here. So
Beautiful.
we can move on.
Beautiful. So now, where would you like to start in this conversation? How would you like to take this audience on this journey, into what you do as a data expert? How do you like to take us through your journey? Where would you like to start?
I think it might make sense to give a really high 10,000-foot level introduction to people, like even what data is. Like a lot of us are familiar with the term data, but we don't really know what the term data means in an organization and what does it include or what does it look like. What's the importance of data. I think we could start there, and I'll be getting in through the specifics of how the data helps the businesses. What's the need for it, what's the need for centralization, and then talk into the specifics.
Beautiful. So, would you like to share a screen?
Sure, let me pull it up. All right, so we hear the term data, and data in general can be anything, right? Can be a set of numbers. It can be any information that you have about some, either a system, or either a person, either a customer. It could be as simple as, like, you like something, right? Let's say you like movies, or you like to play games. Or it could be as complex as, let's say you're the owner of a retail store. What are your sales of the products? What are the products you sell? How many stores do you operate? So data in general is any kind of information that can be put on a paper. So whether it's in the form of like a tabular form, or whether it's a PDF, or even a pictures or videos. If you're on social media, you're looking at different posts, you're hitting like button, you're commenting on different things. All this is data. Basically any information that can be put into a system is basically data. And then what happens with data, right? Why is data even useful for an organization, right? When you're managing an enterprise, let's take a quick example that you have your own retail store where you sell different clothing items, right? As you grow your business, you want to be able to know, what are the products you sell, or how much sales are you making every day, or, what your revenues are, what your operating expenses are, how many employees are there in your retail store. So you want to be able to have some visibility on your data, so you know how your business is performing, and then help you to make decisions on, what's my next target. Do I start selling more products, or maybe I put in a promotion for Thanksgiving, or BOGO offer, maybe changing your target audience. So data in real world gets generated by every action that we do in reality, right? If you're looking at social media, you're looking at some pictures on Twitter or Instagram. There's a lot of data that's generated in real world, which unbeknownst to our mind, gets collected by systems to be able to leverage that to make progress on changing consumer behavior, making it dynamic, and helping people's lives easier, right? Even if the conversation we are having right now, right, there's things that are being recorded, like how many people have joined the meeting, what are the different comments being sent out by people, so forth. So in reality, data is everywhere in your real world. Wherever you look at, you're driving your vehicle, right? You have statistics that's captured by the vehicle to say, how fast you're going or where you're going. Did you make a left turn? Did you make a right turn? And everywhere, let's say you're going to a restaurant, you're ordering some food that goes into a system where the chef is going to put up an order, and then it gets cooked, and then you're paying your receipts. So data is present everywhere in the real world. And how data is used by companies is what really drives the power of data architecture and the importance of why we need data architecture and so on. So in general, traditionally, let's say you're in the previous example, you're the owner of a retail store, right? Now, let's say you manage just one store, right? And you have, let's say, 10 products today that you're selling. It's relatively easy for you to put down all your sales or your 10 products inventory information into an Excel spreadsheet, and then manually enter data in there at the end of every day, and then doing your statistics on how much did I sell, what was the profit margin, how much am I making, maybe I need to introduce new products, and so on. But as a company grows, let's say you open 2 more stores in different cities, or you employ a lot more people to manage your retail store. That's when the challenge happens. Now that things that you were doing manually to compile your sales information, you're not able to do them manually anymore, because your complexity now increased to 3 different stores selling 30 more products. So data complexity grows as people keep doing actions, as more and more purchases happen. Data just grows in complex world. So why do we even need data architecture? Like, what is even data architecture? Like, how does it help the company? So data architecture in general basically streamlines and automates the collection of data and processing of the data. So it helps create faster decisions by the business owners and have more accurate and meaningful insights out of data, right? So if you really want to understand, how your business is going, at the end of the day, all you look at is your revenue, your profit margin, your operational expenses. And having that data in a timely manner is critical for you to be able to make decisions quickly and more effectively. So, I worked as a consultant, mainly, with different companies. So I've worked with companies where there was zero architecture in their organization, like, people relying on Excel spreadsheets and manual process, to companies where there's a sophisticated, advanced data architecture already in place, but then there's always challenges related to that. So we're going to be talking through the challenges and a little bit more in the coming slides, and I'll take a quick pause there, Russell, for you if you have any questions.
No, I am particularly enjoying it. Again, it's the simplicity I love, right? The fact that you're walking us through how an organization really handles data, bringing it back home to issues that they may be facing as they deal with their data architecture. So please fire away. I do not have any questions, but again, for the audience, do well to drop a question on the chat. We'll definitely get there as soon as we see those questions, and Anurag will respond. Thank you. Please go ahead.
So I'll take one of the best examples I've had in my career, to explain the need of a data architecture to someone that's, non-technical space, right? Think about, you want to start a restaurant, right? When you want to start a new restaurant, there's some planning involved that goes towards, how you want to construct the restaurant, right? What size of kitchen do you need to have? How your kitchen needs to be organized. What sections are you going to keep in your kitchen? You need a space for poultry, you need a space for produce, you need a space for freezer, which is, and kitchen is really what's called as like where the magic happens, right? All the secret recipes stay in there, the chefs are cooking your food. And then you as a customer enter the restaurant, you take a seat, you look at a catalog of menus that are sold in the restaurant, and then you order an item. Now, when you order an item, you get the food, in a really well presented way within your plate that looks so delicious, that smells really good, and you're just eager to have your food and you love it, right? just as how a restaurant operates, right? What are the things involved in a restaurant? A similar flow of constructs are involved in a data architecture space, right? So think about what it takes from getting your raw materials to cooking the food and presenting your food to the customer, right? It all starts with, getting all your raw materials like your raw meat or, your produce items, your spices, and so forth. These are all, think of all these are like your different data sets, different data that's existing within your system. So comparing to a restaurant, you could have, you could have data about your products, what items are we sourcing from the supplier. You could have data about, how much inventory do I have in my kitchen for each of those items, right? From which supplier am I getting the products, at what cost am I getting the products. Now, once you get your raw materials, you go through a process of, doing a quality check on your items that are sourced in to make sure they're of good quality, they're adequate, right? If there's anything bad that's within the raw materials, we just trash them, right? Similarly, in the data architecture space, there involves a cleaning process to really clean your data and master your data to remove all the bad qualities and so forth. And then, your chefs start preparing the food, which essentially relates to your data team, like your developers or engineers or QAs, who actually start processing that data to make it look more good, to process it using business logic in a way that it's presentable to the users, right? So you have recipes that tells the chef like, okay, this is how much amount of quantity or specific food I need to go in my cooking process. Similarly, you have a data catalog in a data architecture world to tell you, okay, these are all the data I need, and I need to combine these in a specific way to form an output that could be, like a visualization or, an analytical layer, right? Once the data is processed and so forth, before you present the food to the customer, you look at the aesthetics of the food, right? You want to make sure that, the plate is really clean, the food is well organized. And similarly, in the data world, once that data is processed, we organize the data into a well-defined structure, giving it more like a visual appearance before that data is presented to the users. So in the data world, your customers are more, could be your internal business owners, like different departments, could be, finance department, your accounting department, marketing department. And then on the kitchen side, you have your core IT team, which involves, engineers and developers that's actually doing all the behind the scenes work to make the data happen. So just as why a kitchen needs an organization with different areas to help prepare the food, companies need data architecture to help organize and store their data, in different zones and help prepare faster insights out of that data.
Wow. Wow, that is beautiful. I see a couple of questions are dropping in, and I'm yet to share them though. Let's see. So, first of all, we have people welcoming you, basically, in different in different languages, and we have different individuals welcoming you in, even those sharing love and excitement to have you here. So beautiful. Now, one of the questions that we've seen here is from Michael Collins.
We've had issues of data integrity with major companies like Yahoo, where passwords have been stolen and leaked. What advice can you provide us to avoid our data falling prey to such? So we're going to be covering specifics around data security and data privacy. But in general, one of the things we consider as part of data architecture evaluation is, we categorize data at the beginning of an implementation to say, is it confidential data or is it non-confidential data? Things like personal information, like your passwords, your date of birth. We employ techniques such as data encryption, data masking that companies leverage, where your data doesn't exist in the system as the way it actually is, but the data gets hashed into different sets of characters and numbers that companies leverage to help protect the confidentiality of, user private information. Now, do all the companies really have tight security protocols? That's where the challenges come in, right? Companies that do employ architecture, sometimes, there's exist some gaps within, how the data is held, how the data is moved between the systems. So it's more of a guidance around data governance and data security practices, that as a recommendation to the companies to mask your data, to encrypt the data. And there's also action surrounding data accessibility, right? Making sure that no users have access to any of the raw data that gets generated from people like us. So from a consumer standpoint, the best advice would be is, when you're creating an account or creating a password, try to put something that's more complex, that's hard to crack, right? If do not ever put date of birth as your password or your last name as your password, because that easily is tie back to your personal information and can be easily guessed by an intruder. So try to come up with your secret keywords or anything that you think is like really confidential that no one else can think of as your passwords.
Beautiful. I love that answer. There is also a question from Prakul. It's on the screen.
What is one of the best ways that you have seen to break into the data space when working with cloud services? What separates an individual from the rest when it comes to entry level roles? Something that would make you say, wow. Okay. So the best ways that I've seen people break into data space is, if you're talking for someone that's in a technical role, like, always try to think outside of the box, how you can make process better, right? So let's say you're working with a company as a developer and you have been asked to do X, Y, and Z, and this is how the data flows from, from starting point to the target point. um, when you're assigning work, try to think about, assess basic questions like, what exactly are you doing? What data is flowing through the process, and how is that data helping the business, right? Are there any things for improvement, right? In some of the clients I've worked with, it takes close to 2 to 3 days for someone to be able to get some data on a request, right? Versus in some companies I've worked with, it's more real time. If I want to look at my sales at a specific store right now, what sales I have, within the past hour, I have direct visibility to it. So try to identify, what could make your life easier, right? If there's any manual process involved, try to come up with, an idea of, what could make it better. Think outside the box, play around. And there's a lot of solutions out there in the market that one can research and really understand how it's going to help within the use case you're trying to solve, based on different factors that comes into picture. um, and what separates an individual from the rest when it comes to entry level roles? So usually when companies are looking for technical hiring around the data centric, they're looking for more, people that can think analytically and come up with, recommendations or how to make things better, right? So let's say you're a programmer, you're a Python programmer, and you perfectly know how to code, how to program, right? um, Companies tend to look for people where, you're able to take into consideration what's happening and being able to change that into technical requirements and come up with something better, right? Not necessarily that you need to implement something, but as simple as bringing up an idea that, hey, maybe we could automate this, that would save us 10 hours of time from every person in the team every week for compiling manual data. Or maybe changing this process to run every day instead of every week, so we can catch up with some live information. So have that open mindset. think about opportunities that will help you to automate, alleviate any manual work, especially around data consolidation. That would help.
Beautiful. We have another question from SNM. It says, what is the difference between a data analyst and a data architect?
So a data analyst is more like, if I have the data, let's say I'm a data analyst. If I have the data I need, how can I analyze that data to create some insights out of it, right? So let's say, I have a request from the organization to say, they want visibility for all of their sales information along with, what their operating expenses are. So as an analyst, I'm responsible to collect the data that's already, centralized and storaged, and being able to bring some analysis out of it. Whereas a data architect is basically creating a solution to how we can achieve that goal, right? In order for the organization to have visibility on all their information, the data architect takes those requirements, converts them into the technical solutions to say, this is a system we need, and we need to build a process that runs every hour to integrate with these systems that can collect data and store that data. So a data architect really architects your system, creates the blueprint of how the solution has to look in order to achieve certain goals of the business.
Beautiful. Beautiful. One second. There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I'm so sorry. For some reason, my my screen just disappeared. So now I love the questions and the way we've been tackling those questions. I had a question around on my own around the challenges that you are facing with data from your experience. What are those things that you see on the field that you like this audience to be aware of from a challenge perspective? Because of course it's not all rosy and fun. Sometimes
Right.
there are challenges and problems. You want to tell us about those, please?
Sure. Just as any other space, the data world has its own set of challenges. It's not always a straight road down the path, where you're going to happy path. There's some challenges, that business entails, or sometimes you as a data architect might encounter some challenges to designing your solution. Some of the examples that I can think of, in clients that I've worked with, where there was like no architecture at all in place, right? They've had challenges like, I'm having to spend 20 hours of my time every week trying to compile information. I have to download these spreadsheets. I have to tie all these spreadsheets together. I need to download data from my emails, and I need to consolidate them together. There's challenges like, creating data silos with that, right? As your company grows, let's say, you have three different people trying to pull data from three different places. And what happens is we create data silos in that situation, right? So when you consolidate your data in a spreadsheet, it's not centrally accessible to everyone in your organization, right? So one person may change some data on that spreadsheet, making the other team members with obsolete information because they're not connected together. So now people, each department may be looking at different information and making decisions out of those redundant or inaccurate information that might change the overall way of how the business is operating. In some of the companies that I've worked with, where there was already an architecture in place, but then they've had challenges like the data is of low quality, right? They always get some bad data in the system that's messing up their entire infrastructure, messing up their reports. Um, People have to wait for days together. If there's a bad data that gets into the system, or people have to spend manually countless hours to clean up data. So there's delayedness in data, which essentially speaks to people not having visibility on data for days together when something happens, right? Especially this affects, if you're talking about retail companies, during the week of Thanksgiving, where there's a huge rush of sales, by people across the country. If you don't have direct visibility on how your sales are or what my inventory levels are, companies cannot make effective decisions on, did we sell good enough or we didn't sell good enough? Is there something we need to do in the next week? What is my inventory levels looking like? So it's common for companies to have challenges in this space. Um, and then the way the challenges can be tackled is essentially more planning, right? If you're in a situation where there's no technical people involved in the organization, but you're trying to implement a data architecture, try to come up with solutions that can identify some quick wins, right? Just as an example, we referred to earlier, the restaurant, right? Why a restaurant needs organization, and then similarly, why the data architecture needs to be happen within a company essentially speaks to that, right? So try to identify, smaller quick wins, how you can essentially convert your technical capabilities into some meaningful sentences that could be understood by the business folks. So there's different techniques we employ at different organizations, right? For the challenges that I've talked about, where there's low quality of data, right? Typically, the recommendations is to include some kind of data quality checks as we get in the data. Just as simple as if you're buying some produce items in a grocery store, you take a look at them, just a quick glance to see if they're good or not. Similarly, in the data space, you employ, quality checks like, did I get all the data I need from the system today, right? Do I have all the numbers? Do I have all the columns? Is my date looking in the right format? Things like zip codes, for example, right? I've worked in a use case where one of the company had a challenge with storing people addresses because in the United States, the zip codes only consist of numbers, but in Canada, you could have a zip code with numbers and characters in it. So there's amount of pre-work and pre-planning that needs to be done essentially at the design of an architecture to take into consideration, what data are we going to store? How often are we going to store it? What does the data look like? How often are we going to get the data? Is it one single file or is it 100 different files? So there's pre-planning work that needs to be done before a true architecture can be designed.
Wow, exciting. When you talk about all of this, one of the thoughts that play at the back of my mind, Anurag, is AI. What role does AI help with this? You talked about data being, data need to be cleaned, data need to be structured. What happens in the US and in Canada, they are different. How can AI, how do you envision AI helping to shape the field of data architecture? And from a business perspective, how do businesses, from your experience, how are they taking advantage of AI to support their data architecture?
Sure. So I think if you look back at the last 2 decades, for really large organizations that grew up to a massive scale, companies like Amazon or Microsoft or even Google, they're in the space where they already have data architecture in place for a long time now. They had advanced systems that can look at the data, compile the data, analyze the sales. But what's truly happening is, as you have more companies within a same space that are competing against each other, people try to look for solutions that are more forecasting oriented, right? So that's where we have machine learning and AI coming into the picture, wherein they take the data that already exists and you can leverage machine learning to identify patterns or behavioral information from your data to say, okay, maybe within the next month people are looking to buy winter coats because the temperatures are dropping by. So AI is really driving the space, and to simulate human intelligence in computers through data. And by applying different machine learning models, companies are able to facilitate faster provision of products and services to the consumers, essentially making people's lives more easier, right? Some of the examples we could think of just within the last few years is, all these smart devices like Siri, Alexa, and everything that has captured people's minds in being able to accomplish things just through their voice, right? You don't have to, if you want to set a timer or be reminded of something tomorrow, you don't have to like go into your phone, set a reminder or anything. You just say a verbal sentence and then the device captures it and then reminds you at that time. So companies are leveraging AI in different industries, including like healthcare, education, transportation. We have electric cars coming up across different companies now, and there's huge amount of AI being leveraged to like enable self-driving and robo taxis across the city.
Anurag, what you just explained, I love it for many reasons. It's clear, it looks easy, but you and I know that it is expensive. Now, let's kind of shift a little bit into money. Let's talk about return on investments. When organizations spend so much money in doing all the things you've just described, how do they measure their return on investment for data architecture projects? A leader might be watching this. He's driving an enterprise-wide transformation and they rely on data as a shared service. How do you discuss return on investment, especially when they need to bubble up that proposal of setting up these kind of beautiful things you just described in the organization? How would he take that proposal up to his leadership? How would you advise him to measure return on investment?
So in my experience, I think that was the first step that's included, when I work with clients is I truly need to showcase why data architecture is needed and how it helps company on the long-term roadmap to generate success, right? So the simplest approach to that could be, assessing the current state, right? Just assess the current state and see, if there's any processes that are happening manual, right? Process could be as simple as, someone has to download a file from an email, or someone has to download data from a system. They need to clean up some records, and then they pass that information to someone else. So basically, you're trying to identify areas where this potential scope of automation, right? A simple example, let's say, if we have an employee that's working a full-time job, Monday to Friday, and if he's spending, let's say, 50% of his time trying to compile information, you're essentially paying that person 20 hours a week to just compile the information. And let's say in order for you to automate that, you make an assessment of 100 hours. So you showcase the why and how of the ROI to say, if he spend 100 hours of work to automate certain things, you're going to save 20 hours of work every week. And then you can just measure the ROI from there eventually. And then, part of the challenge sometimes is also, to make awareness and technology, right? Over the past couple years in my career, the rise of cloud computing has led to creating opportunities where, you don't have to buy physical servers or physical hard drives to create a solution that needs automation. You have now solutions from different companies like Microsoft and Amazon that you just pay a couple $100 to kick off your proof of concept and build a small solution, right? Try to identify quick wins, right? If let's say you have a project where there's 10 systems involved, try to narrow down the scope of your project to focus on just 2 systems, right? Try to come up with a proof of concept or a prototype automation, and then it takes a lot less time to accomplish that. And then once you have a working concept, use that as a showcase model to showcase to the stakeholders to say, okay, we were able to achieve some value just by integrating these 2 systems. That's saving 5 hours of work every week for this team. And imagine the potential if we are able to automate the entire enterprise stack within the organization. We're going to save countless hours. And that not necessarily means that, people who were spending time manually would no longer have anything to do, but they could use that time better off of leveraging the power of data to make better decisions and creating value out of the data, rather than spending, compiling the data or creating spreadsheets and so forth.
Wow. Thank you. Mohammed asked the question here, which is on the screen. Would you like to go through it?
Sure. So if data is compromised or breached within a company, the security system would need to be upgraded, right? What happens when it's breached not long after updating security? Is there anything out there like highest level of data security? So data security is itself a huge space within the overall world of data. Depending on if your data is healthcare oriented, which employs a lot more strict regulations and standards around data. So typically, when there's a compromise that companies realize that there's a cyber attack and a compromise has happened, the first thing people do is to really investigate the vulnerabilities within the system, right? um, Typically this happens because of not well organized planning at the time of implementation, which essentially leads to vulnerabilities around we had a compromise on specific system, right? So they do an assessment of the existing state to see what the vulnerabilities were, and then try to come up with patches which could vary from as simple as maybe making the access level to private instead of public, to as complex as making their whole organization into a private cloud instead of a public cloud. Um, so data security needs to go hand in hand at the time of starting out your data architecture, and there's different levels of security that comes into picture, defining what data are we going to store and how are we going to store it, right? So if you think about like the personal information that I talked about earlier, typically the industry best practice are to store such information in an encrypted manner using algorithms, so that even if the data gets compromised, people will not be able to decode that data because it just appears as a bunch of junk characters. So even if the data gets compromised, there's no personal information that is lost. And then there's also practices around setting up access controls and keeping an audit trail of who has access to what, which is where data governance comes into picture. And depending the size of the organization, there could be specific dedicated teams assigned to just focusing on data governance and security, so forth. In terms of like highest level of data security, I think it all depends on what practices we want to put into play as part of the architecture, right? So common things are going to be like data encryption, data hashing, and then making sure you have a private network for your organization infrastructure, so that reduces your exposure to the public internet. And then also is good what's good is as part of your governance board or security strategies is to keep an audit trail, like a monitoring dashboard or report built out of your data. So when a data leaves the system, people have visibility on where that data is going or who's accessing it and so forth. So things like these will help to catch compromises well in advance, so being more proactive than being in a reactive state.
Beautiful. But you see, Anurag, I like what you've been doing so far. So far, you have covered all the different elements of data. You've talked about data security, scalability, and performance. You've talked about measuring return on investment for data projects. You just talked about data governance, and you're talking about emerging technologies in data architecture, specifically around AI. Now, a beautiful topic or question that for sure just asked is this: how are you going to tackle it? For sure, thank you very much for asking this, by the way.
Data is everywhere and we can't do without it in our daily lives. My question is about AI and no code like time extender. Do you think the job of coders like those writing Python scripts be redundant in future? Um, so I think AI is definitely driving the world in making people's lives easier. Um, not just being able to answer questions that weren't had answers before, but I think, yeah, to your point, it's definitely helping developers be able to accomplish things with a no code approach. This, just like time extender, there's a lot of solutions that can come in the industry where you can automate certain things and build out your automated integrations without having to use any code, and just leveraging graphical user interface to drag and drop and connect those things. So I think the job of coders will still have to exist. It's safe to say that no AI solution is 100% perfect, because though data exists everywhere, the data keeps changing in real world, right? If we build a solution like an algorithm or um, a process, the solution may work for the next 1 year or for the next 2 years of your business, but as your business grows, there's more and more new types of data that come into picture where we do require technical resources to be able to scale the solution in a way that it can accept new types of data. So I think there would still be requirement of having developers needed to be able to build and manage the solution. But they this time could be spent creating out of the box solutions and creating leveraging machine learning to create like better algorithms and better decision making capabilities.
Ooh, that is beautiful. Thank you. So, just for those who are new to the world of AI and Python scripts, we kind of put a very quick definition of time extender so they know the meaning. It's just below on the screen. Thank you very much. Now, let's talk a little with the remaining few minutes. We have 13 minutes to the end of the session. There are a couple of people who are watching right now. We have about 140 of us kind of just listening patiently to the message you're sharing, and a couple of thoughts around next steps, skills. I'm interested. What Anuraag is saying excites me. I want to be like Anuraag, much later when I grow up. Let's talk about that a little bit. What's your advice for those who are aspiring to have data architecture or data analytics or data, get into the data world? What's your recommendation? Where do you want them to start? How do you want them to really, craft their journey so that they can one day become the next Anurag?
Sure. I think for someone that's probably not in the technical space today, that are willing to enter the IT world, um, my recommendation would be start getting familiarity with what data is, or what are the solutions that's existing in the market. There's a lot of online courses that you could take that's open to the public, that helps you to get an understanding of different roles that gets included within the data world. You could serve as a data architect, you could serve as a database administrator, or a database developer. So there's different swim lanes within the data space that allows you to narrow down the roles and responsibilities. So for those that are non-technical, I would recommend exploring yourself, getting familiar, acquainted with the terminologies, and learn about how it helps businesses achieve their problems. Now, for those who are already in the technical space, that already knows some of the IT constructs, if you're all looking to move towards data architecture, typically people that come towards the architect side are your data engineers or data developers or data analysts that work with data, right? So if you already know how data works, if you're already doing work related to data, always keep an open mind and try to think towards, what would make my work easier. If I had this, it helps me to do this quicker, right? Keep that open mindset of, what can be done just to make your life easier, right? And then evaluate your idea against, the existing solutions in the company to see, maybe that helps your entire team, or maybe that helps the entire organization. So keep that open mindset, and you know um, always be open to like explore ideas. And there's a lot of solutions right there in the market where you could build proof of concepts without having to spend like thousands of dollars, right? You can start simple, identify some quick wins. A quick win can be as simple as you're automating download of a file from a system to automatically get the data, right? And it could be as complex as if people are waiting 1 week to get their data, now they could get their data within 1 day. That's still an improvement. So just think about when you're doing your work, why you're doing it, how is it going to help yourself, or how is it going to help the business to make their lives easier. And do your research. There's new technologies that are coming up every quarter in the data world. So going through blogs or just reading through the courses would help provide that information.
Amazing. I love your answer, your response. I'd like to go back a little on the deep end because there are some questions that are still coming, and I know we only have 9 more minutes. One of the questions that came was from SN. DevOps and DevSecOps, how do they fit in to the whole data field?
I think the DevOps and DevSecOps, different organizations may employ different understanding of these terms in regards to how the roles and responsibilities go in for the resources. So DevOps, most commonly people employ DevOps resources to manage not only their operations of the system, so managing your infrastructure, managing your production systems, making sure that the systems are always live and operating, while also keep dedicated towards development of enhancements or bug fixes, or including new features within the systems. DevSecOps could include combination of more than just development and operations. Being responsible maybe to manage your release.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think we hit a snag. Anuraag is a little frozen. So let's just give him a minute or so to, readjust on his internet so he can reconnect. So, but beautiful questions so far. Um, Singh, I see your question, and that's the next question that Anurag is going to be answering after this. So let's see Anurag come back. 1 second. All right. So he's. Let me see. Okay. So he kind of logged out, and he'll be coming right back in. Just give him a second. Thank you very much. Please do drop your questions in on the group. We're definitely going to get into it. So, but so far, before Anurag returns, we have covered a lot of things. Since we started about what, about 55 minutes ago, we have covered the challenges with data integration. We have covered data quality and consistency. We have talked about the impact of AI and machine learning on data. We've talked about data security and privacy. We've talked about what else have we talked about? We've talked about scalability and performance, where we said companies, they are growing. Anurag, if you remember in that conversation, Anurag talked about Google, talked about Amazon, These are organizations that are very heavy. They rely on loads of data to be able to run their operation and run their organization effectively. And he talked about how they can scale and run their operations effectively regardless of their size. And then Anuraag talked about measuring return on investment on data projects. He talked about data governance and compliance. And then he talked about emerging technologies in data architecture. And finally, he was providing advice for aspiring data architects. And here he is again. Anuraag, I'll just give you a quick summary, when you disconnected about what you've covered so far. Beautiful.
Sorry, I just had a network disruption.
Not a problem. So now, Anurag, the last question with the remaining minutes that we have is from Singh, data architects and solution architects. Let's talk about that a little bit, if you don't mind.
Sure. What kind of solutions architect do to be easier to work with when working with a data architect? So depending on the specifics of the roles and responsibilities, data architects could be more centric towards focusing on just the data aspects of integrations between the systems. And the best way to have a collaborative communication and be able to accomplish better is to keep an open collaborative space where solutions architect truly understands the value of data as well, in specifics around why we need the data handshake to be in a certain way, why we need encryption within the data. So typically it's common when you have teams with solutions architect and data architect to work hand in hand. So you not only productivize the solution from a data standpoint, but you're narrowing down the solution from the overall enterprise architecture standpoint. So it's common for even enterprise architects to be involved in data conversations, so they understand the criticality of the data or the components around when you have use cases like you're dealing with data from the European Union, right? You have GDPR regulations that specifically talk about how your data cannot leave outside of the European region, or how the data needs to stay back in the system. So while solutions architect helps you to streamline the overall solution, data architects help to emphasize on the data side of the solutions.
Wow. Beautiful. Anurag, amazing, amazing. One of the things I really respect and admire about you is your ability to show up. Um, 5 years ago or 6 years ago, we worked together on a data project, and with the explanation you have given in this session, I have a good understanding of what the MDM team was doing way back then, especially as it relates to cleaning the data, making sure that all of that information is really aligned for the business. And I understand, the scaling, because you and I were working on a logistics project about 5 years, 6 years ago, and it was amazing to really, the way you tell this story. Now I could look back and understand exactly what we were doing and why. And then I'm also very excited with the way you've been able to blend your experience over time with AI, and you are constantly evolving. I know you are a senior solution data architect right now, and it must have been very exciting. And then I remember also in 2021, we invited you to our program, and you gave a lecture also on data. It was well attended. Over 150 to 200 people were in attendance, and it was because of popular demand. They enjoyed your session way back then, the way you were able to simplify a concept like data, that 3 years or 2 years later, they actually wanted you back again so you could tell us how data has evolved. Thank you very much for really coming back to the Glappy Village and really supporting and exchanging your time to actually grow professionals within this community, and also help tech leaders who are actually watching on decisions they could take to really improve their investment in data and data architectures. Anurag, are there any final words you'd like to share with this community before we let you go?
Um, Now for those who are interested in exploring more, there's a lot of open online courses. There's a lot of open information. So feel free to do your own research, have an open mind. And data is truly interesting. Once you get into what insights you can pull from data, and if you can connect them to the real world, it helps you to drive your power.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, that's all we have time for. Looking forward to seeing you in the next session. The next session is going to be with Oluwatobi Bamidele. He is a product manager and he's going to be sharing his story with us. Come join us on the 20th of September, to see exactly how the product management world works. Thank you very much, Anurag, and looking forward to seeing you again hopefully not too long from now. Thank you.
Thank you. Likewise.
All right. Yeah. Bye-bye.